Hi, my name is Hannah. I am 31 years old, living with my 9-year-old son, Ethan. This year, as I was hanging small ornaments on the Christmas tree in our apartment in Denver, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. This Christmas is only for Chloe's kids. Don't come. Just 10 short words, yet to me, they cut like a cold blade. For so many years, I had grown used to being pushed aside, used to seeing Chloe praised while I stood quietly on the margins. But this time, instead of protesting or begging, I simply typed back one word. Okay. What they never knew was that I had just finished purchasing a $6 million estate in Colorado, a place vast, warm, and filled with light. And when other relatives, those who had also been cast aside like me, came looking for shelter, I opened the doors to them. That Christmas, we all sat together around the long table, with laughter and candlelight filling the room, while my phone buzzed nonstop with angry calls from my parents. Before I continue the story, I have one question for you. Have you ever felt abandoned by your family in a moment that was supposed to belong to you? If so, tell me where you are listening to this story from, so I can know I am not alone. I was born and raised in St. Louis, in a small house on a quiet street where an old oak tree stretched its branches wide, shading the front porch. It was once a place I called home, but for many years I felt more like a guest surviving in a space that was never truly mine. From a very young age, I noticed the difference in how my parents treated me compared to my younger sister, Chloe. Chloe was always called the baby, the little angel, the child who knew how to win adults over with her sweet smile and sparkling eyes. As for me, I was calm and more introverted, preferring books and small crafts. To outsiders, Chloe was adorable while I was difficult. And from that, the line between the loved one and the forgotten one slowly began to take shape. I still remember the first time I won a science award in middle school. It was a small project on solar energy that had taken me an entire month of research and tinkering, using cheap panels I had bought at a thrift store. When my teacher announced that I had won, I couldn't wait to rush home, imagining the moment my parents would hug me, tell me how proud they were, and boast to the neighbors that their eldest daughter was brilliant. But when I handed my mother the certificate, she barely glanced at it before setting it down on the table. "Yes, very good, dear. But did you see Chloe practice the piano today? She played an entire piece without missing a single note." I froze, the smile on my face turning stiff, while Chloe beamed beside me, soaking in the radiant eyes and endless praise. In that moment, I understood that no matter how hard I tried, the light in that house would always shine only on her. One of the most vivid memories from my childhood is Christmas when I was 15. That year, my parents set up a big tree in the living room, and we all gathered around it to open presents. I can still recall the atmosphere that day, the smell of gingerbread filling the air, the sound of jingle bells playing from the old radio, and the sparkling lights reflecting off the red and green wrapping paper. When it was Chloe's turn, my parents handed her a brand new bicycle, shiny pink with wheels that still carried the fresh scent of rubber. Chloe squealed with delight, hugging our mother tightly, while our father snapped picture after picture to capture the special moment. I sat beside them, my heart beating fast, waiting for my turn. When a small package was passed to me, I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a gray wool scarf. My mother gave a faint smile and said, "It's cold in winter, I knitted this for you." I held the scarf, forcing a smile, but inside I felt only emptiness. It was as if I wasn't worthy of receiving a gift that could make my heart race, as if my joy didn't matter. From that moment on, the image of that gray scarf became a symbol of my place in the family. A shadowed corner, remembered only in passing, never at the center. The family gatherings that came later were not much different. On every holiday, everyone would gather in the large dining room. The main table was always reserved for my parents, Chloe, and the important guests. As for me, even though I was no longer a child, I was often seated at the side table with the younger cousins. I sat there, trying to join in their childish conversations, while my eyes drifted again and again toward the main table, where Chloe was the center of attention, asked questions, showered with praise. celebrated as though she were the axis of the entire universe. Each time, I felt like a shadow on the edge, someone out of rhythm within her own family. I cannot remember how many times I faked a smile, nodded along just to get through it, while inside the wound dug deeper and deeper. That favoritism was not just about gifts or compliments. It was the way my parents had built an entire structure within our family, one where Chloe was automatically the worthy one, and I was the extra. I learned to stay silent, learned to seek joy in my own corner. I learned not to expect so that I would not be disappointed. But the truth is, every time I was left out, every time an achievement of mine was ignored, I felt another small piece of my heart break. That feeling, stretching across my childhood and into my adult years, became a deep wound, a quiet fire that pushed me forward. I had to find a place where I truly belonged, a table of my own making, where I would no longer be pushed to the side table, where my son and I could hold our heads high without fear of being dismissed. And I swore that one day, I would make that vision real. I still remember vividly when I was 22, the year my life turned in a direction I had never imagined. When I discovered I was pregnant, I nearly collapsed. My boyfriend at the time, the one I naively believed would hold my hand until the end, looked at me with tired eyes and said, "I'm not ready for this." Just a few days later, he disappeared completely from my life, without a goodbye, without a single promise. I stood in front of the mirror, my trembling hand resting on my stomach, caught between fear and helplessness. One question echoed in my mind: am I strong enough for this? When I told my parents, hoping for even the smallest ounce of protection, their response cut me like a knife. My mother looked at me with judgment, and my father coldly said, "Get rid of it. If you choose to have the baby, you're on your own. We have to take care of Chloe. She's getting married soon, she needs stability." I was stunned, thrown out the door once again, wondering how my parents could say such words to their own daughter. With no hope left, no place to lean on, I understood that I could only rely on myself and the life growing inside me. During the first months of my pregnancy, I tried to keep studying, but when my belly began to show, I dropped out and threw myself into work. I took on 3 jobs at once, serving in a small cafe during the day, cleaning offices at night, and working weekends at a supermarket. At night, before Ethan was even born, I sat in my cramped rented room with an old laptop I had bought with saved money, teaching myself to code for the very first time. I typed each line, my vision blurring with exhaustion, but inside me flickered a fragile hope. If I could write these lines of code, maybe I could rewrite my fate. The day Ethan was born was a bitterly cold autumn day. I held him in my arms, looking at his tiny face and the little hands waving in the air, and tears streamed down my cheeks. I knew, from that moment on, I was no longer living just for myself. I had the responsibility to be a pillar, a guiding light for my son. And somehow, Ethan became the very source of energy that kept me moving forward, even when the entire world seemed to turn its back on me. The first years of raising him were a stretch of relentless hardship. There were nights when I had to rock Ethan to sleep while balancing my laptop on my lap, coding until dawn to finish a small freelance project from an online client. I once fainted in the bathroom from exhaustion after a night shift, only to force myself up moments later to prepare his bottle. There were times when rent was due and I had only a few dollars left in my account. I survived on instant noodles for a week, saving every proper meal for Ethan. Yet, through all of it, I saw the sparkle in his eyes, heard the purity of his laughter, and I knew I was not allowed to collapse. Through free online courses and the programming forums I quietly joined, I gradually built a foundation in the tech field. I started working remotely for a few small companies, slowly gaining experience. Eventually, I took the leap and founded a small startup focused on data management software for medical clinics. The first time, I failed miserably and lost the little capital I had scraped together. The second time, I partnered with the wrong person, was taken advantage of, and nearly went bankrupt. But instead of giving up, I treated each setback as an expensive but invaluable lesson. Whenever I thought about giving up, all I had to do was look at Ethan, the little boy sitting in the corner of the living room with a comic book in his hands, his legs swinging back and forth, and I would feel a new surge of strength rise within me. I thought about the future, a day when my son could proudly tell his friends, "My mom did everything so I could have a better life." The road I walked was never straight. It was full of potholes, covered in shadows, and there were times I stumbled hard. But each time I stood back up, I felt a little stronger than before. And Ethan was the only reason I never stopped. My son became living proof that love can transform a weary and lost woman into a warrior, daring to defy everything in order to build a new world for the two of us. I learned one thing. No matter how terrible your starting point, no matter how much your family turns their back on you, you can still rebuild your life from nothing. For me, it all began night after night, under the dim glow of a desk lamp, with the steady clatter of keys, and the sight of my son sleeping peacefully in the worn-out crib right beside me. That winter night, after years of struggling with small projects, I decided to pour all my energy into a daring idea. A medical logistics platform that directly connected suppliers with hospitals, allowing real-time tracking of medicine and equipment. When I shared the idea with a few old friends in the tech industry, they laughed. "Hannah, who would ever need such a complicated system? Hospitals are doing just fine with their old processes." I didn't argue. I only knew one thing. Those long freelance nights working for small clinics had shown me the cracks. Just one delayed shipment, and patients were the ones who suffered. I wanted to build a tool that could save those life or death moments. When the COVID-19 pandemic suddenly erupted, everything changed overnight. Medical demand skyrocketed, and the fragile old systems exposed every flaw. It was then that my platform became a lifeline. Hospitals and small clinics began reaching out, asking to test it. My tiny team and I worked around the clock, downing cup after cup of coffee to keep the system running. In those days, I almost lost track of time itself, taking calls with clients by day, fixing code by night, holding Ethan close in my arms while checking data. But it was precisely the brutality of the pandemic that transformed my risky idea into the product everyone suddenly needed. In just 1 year, that platform spread across dozens of healthcare systems. We were praised as the silent operators behind countless lives saved. I will never forget the moment a doctor sent me an email. "If it weren't for your system, we wouldn't have had enough blood for last night's surgery." As I read those words, tears streamed down my face, and Ethan, sitting beside me, quietly handed me a tissue and whispered, "Mom, I'm proud of you." Bye. Not long after, a major corporation expressed interest in acquiring the company. At first, I hesitated, but when I looked at my growing son, I knew it was time to step into a new chapter. The deal closed at a number I had never dared to dream of, enough not only to clear every debt, not only to secure the best schools for Ethan, but also to finally create a true home for the two of us. I chose Aspen. Not for its luxury, but because I wanted a space quiet enough to hear the wind, vast enough for Ethan to run free without feeling confined. I placed a down payment on a $6 million estate, a property nestled in the snow-covered Rockies. On the very first day I set foot there, I could hardly believe I was living in reality. The villa was built from washed pine wood, solid and simple, yet carrying the elegance of a carefully designed structure. The living room opened wide, with glass walls stretching from floor to ceiling, offering a sweeping view of the endless mountains. At sunset, the red glow lit up each rocky ridge, reflecting into the room and making it blaze like a living painting. At the center stood a granite fireplace taller than a man, the crackling flames like a heart that never stopped welcoming warmth. The kitchen was open concept, with a white marble island where I could cook while chatting with Ethan or friends. Each bedroom had its own balcony, stretching out over the snow-covered valley. I chose a small but fully furnished room for Ethan. A sturdy oak bed, bookshelves running along the wall, and a round window overlooking a private lake I had dug and filled with fish. I also prepared a room for Grandma Ruth, the only emotional anchor I had in my childhood. What I loved most was the long, solid walnut dining table in the dining room, large enough to seat 20 people. As I ran my hands over the wood's natural grain, I thought to myself, "This will be my true table." The place where I decide who is invited, who sits, and where no one is ever pushed aside. When Ethan ran down the wide hallway for the first time, he shouted, "Mom, this is like a castle." I laughed, pulled him into my arms, and my heart swelled with both fulfillment and emotion. Years of sweat and tears, countless nights with only the sound of keys clicking and the weight of loneliness, had finally brought us here, a place I could call home without feeling like an outsider. But I kept everything to myself. I didn't tell my parents, didn't share with Chloe, and not a single member of the family knew about the estate. I knew that if I spoke of it, they would twist it into one of Chloe's triumphs or spin the story, so I remained nothing more than a shadow. The estate in Aspen was my secret, the one card I held close until the right moment came. And deep down, I believed that day would arrive soon, because once again, I had been excluded from the family table, but this time, I had an entire world of my own with which to respond. When I first stepped into the estate in Aspen, I thought I would feel nothing but relief, but a few days after my mother's message, the ache lingered like a cloud that refused to lift. I was used to being left out, but this time, with Ethan by my side, the bitterness cut twice as deep. I couldn't explain to my son why his grandparents didn't want us home for Christmas. Innocently, Ethan asked, "Mom, where are we going for Christmas this year? Will Grandma and Grandpa let me open presents?" I could only stroke his hair and change the subject, my chest tightening with pain. That afternoon, I decided to call Aunt Susan, my mother's younger sister, a woman both gentle and outspoken. When her voice came through the line, tinged with surprise and sadness, I knew immediately I wasn't the only one cast aside. "Hannah, they left you out too?" she sighed. I forced a smile, though my throat felt dry. "You too?" I asked. She told me my mother had invited only Chloe's family this year, using the excuse of wanting to keep it warm and simple. "Warm for who?" Aunt Susan said bitterly. "Warm means just a small circle. And the rest of us? Are we suddenly strangers?" I felt my heart tighten. It wasn't just me. Aunt Susan, who had spent so many years devoted to the family, had also been cast aside. I called Daniel next, her son, the cousin who had been closest to me growing up. His answer cut like another knife. "Yeah, we weren't invited either. Mom and Dad said this year it's just about letting Chloe's family be comfortable." Makes you want to laugh, doesn't it? Everything always revolves around them. I closed my eyes, hearing the disappointment in Daniel's voice. "My kids keep asking why we're not going to Grandma's for Christmas. I honestly don't know what to tell them." The more I spoke, the clearer it became this was no casual decision. This year, my mother and father had chosen to shrink the family down, to turn Christmas into Chloe's private stage. Everyone else, me, Ethan, Aunt Susan, Cousin Daniel, was simply erased. The last person I called was Grandma Ruth. Her voice trembled when I asked, "Grandma, are you going to your daughter's house for Christmas this year?" She stayed silent for a long moment before answering, "No, Hannah, I wasn't invited. Your mother said she only wanted to spend time with Chloe's little family this year." I could hear the hurt in every word. "I miss the kids, I miss you too. But maybe there's no seat left for me in that house." I bit down hard on my lip as tears spilled over. Grandma, the one who had held me through the loneliest Christmases, was now pushed to the margins too. When I hung up, I sat in silence for hours, staring out the glass wall at the snow-covered Rockies. I was used to the favoritism shown toward Chloe, but this time, it wasn't just me they excluded. They had shut out everyone who didn't fit into their showcase circle. And in that moment, I realized a new truth. I wasn't alone. My exclusion was just one part of a bigger picture, where an entire branch of the family had been dismissed. Right then, a decision rose inside me, clearer and stronger than ever before. If they had closed their doors, then I would open mine. If they had locked the path to their table, then I would build a new table, one where everyone had a seat. I texted Aunt Susan, Daniel, and Grandma Ruth. "If you have no place to go, come to me. Aspen, Colorado. I'll take care of everything." The response came faster than I expected. Daniel called immediately, his voice trembling with emotion. "Are you serious, Hannah? You want all of us to gather at your place?" I smiled, feeling warmth return to my chest for the first time in days. Yes, we don't need to wait for them to grant us a seat. We'll make our own Christmas. Aunt Susan texted back, "Give me the time so I can start packing." And Grandma Ruth, after a pause of silence, said just one short sentence enough to erase all my loneliness. "I'll come. Send me the address." I set the phone down, my chest trembling with emotion. The $6 million estate that had once been only a secret dream was now becoming a real table one, where people would gather not because of a cold invitation, but because they chose to be there. Ethan ran in and wrapped his arms around me. "Mom, are we having guests?" I nodded, my eyes blurring with tears. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to have a Christmas you'll never forget." And for the first time in years, I felt I was no longer alone in that wound. I was no longer just the abandoned child. I was the one holding the chance to open the doors, to rewrite the way our family came together. And this Christmas, I knew for certain, would be different. From the moment Aunt Susan, Daniel, and Grandma Ruth said yes, I refused to sit still any longer. If I dared to extend the invitation, then I had to make it into a Christmas no one could forget. I started by calling an interior decorating company in Aspen, asking them to turn my estate into a true winter wonderland. The manager hesitated at first. "Are you sure? The timeline is very tight." I answered without the slightest doubt, "I'm sure. I want everyone to walk in and know immediately this is our Christmas." In just a few days, the team of decorators worked tirelessly, transforming the already cozy wooden estate into a winter fairy tale. From the front porch, golden lights were strung along the railings, so that when snowflakes fell, they reflected the glow like thousands of tiny diamonds. At the gate, massive wreaths of pine, red berries, and bright red ribbons hung proudly, striking a balance between grandeur and warmth. Stepping into the living room nearly took my breath away. A 14-foot Christmas tree towered in the grand hall, covered in silver ornaments, golden bells, deep red ribbons, and topped with a radiant crystal star that reflected the twinkling lights. Beside it, the granite fireplace roared with steady flames, the smoky scent of burning wood mixing with the faint aroma of cinnamon cookies drifting in from the kitchen. I didn't want things to be just beautiful, I wanted them to touch every heart that entered. That's why I paid special attention to the dining table. I reached out to a local chef named Harper, a woman renowned in the region for blending traditional flavors with modern creativity, and told her I wanted a menu that felt both familiar and unique. She suggested applewood smoked roasted turkey, with crisp golden skin and juicy tender meat, fresh salmon from the nearby lake, grilled with herbs, a winter salad with pecans and blood oranges. And for dessert, warm cinnamon apple pies with flaky crusts that released fragrant steam with every cut. And alongside it all, there had to be creamy eggnog, poured into handmade ceramic mugs, so that when we raised our glasses, everyone could feel the warmth of the season. While the decorating team and the kitchen bustled with work, I spent my time preparing personalized gifts. I knew nothing makes a person feel more cherished than receiving something chosen just for them. For Aunt Susan, I picked a photo book of the Rocky Mountains, knowing her love for photography and her lifelong dream of visiting Colorado. For Daniel's son, I bought a complex Lego spaceship set, the one he had been obsessed with for so long but his parents couldn't afford. For Grandma Ruth, I found a hand-woven sea blue scarf made of the softest wool because I knew her shoulders often ached from the cold in winter. Each gift I wrapped myself in simple brown paper, tied with twine, and tucked a small pine branch under the knot, so that when opened, the receiver would feel both the care and the love folded into it. Ethan became my little helper throughout the preparations. My son sat in the middle of the living room, carefully folding sheets of wrapping paper, sealing them with tape, and grinning with delight as the pile of presents grew taller. At one point, he looked up at me, his eyes shining. "Mom, this feels like our Christmas." I froze, a lump rising in my throat. He was right. This was no longer a Christmas where we were excluded or half-heartedly included. This was our Christmas, one where we chose who sat at the table and who shared in our joy. I pulled him into my arms and whispered, "That's right, Ethan. This is our Christmas, and it will be the best one ever." As night fell and everything finally quieted down, I stepped out onto the porch, watching the golden lights shimmer against the thick blanket of snow. The entire scene felt like it was wrapped in magic. I thought of Aunt Susan, of Daniel, of Grandma Ruth, people who, this year, would have sat quietly in their own homes, feeling not important enough to be invited. And I smiled, because this time, they would walk into a place where everyone was seen, where everyone mattered. Preparing for Christmas this year was not just about decorating, cooking, or buying gifts. For me, it was an act of healing. Every strand of lights strung, every dish planned, every ribbon tied around a package, it all felt like soothing the wound I had carried for so many years. I was no longer the girl sitting at the side table, clutching a gray scarf while my sister showed off her new bicycle. I had become the one setting the table, and this time, no one would be forgotten. That evening, the snow fell heavier than usual, blanketing the slope that led up to the estate. I stood on the porch, my thick coat wrapped around my shoulders, a steaming mug of cider warming my hands. From a distance, I heard the crunch of tires pressing into packed snow, faint at first, then multiplying. SUVs appeared one after another through the cold mist, each covered in a glittering layer of frost that glowed beneath the golden lights I had hung. My heart pounded not from fear, but from a nervous anticipation I had never felt before. This was the first time the family would see the world I had quietly built. The first car stopped, the door swung open, and Daniel stepped out. He wore a worn puffer jacket, his face flushed red from the cold. When he lifted his head and saw the glowing villa against the silver-gray sky, he froze. "Oh my God, Hannah," he exclaimed, his voice a mix of wonder and playful reproach. "You built an entire universe like this and didn't say a word." I laughed, walking over to pull him into a tight hug. "Surprised enough?" Daniel pointed toward the porch, shaking his head over and over. "Surprise doesn't even cover it. This is unbelievable." Soding. Moments later, Aunt Susan's car climbed the slope. She stepped out still holding a tray of pumpkin pie, and her eyes welled with tears the instant she saw the house. "My dear, I never thought I'd live to see something like this. This home, it's breathtaking." I helped her up the steps, taking a deep breath as pride swelled in my chest. The children tumbled out of the car, their laughter spilling across the snowy yard, leaving messy footprints in the white powder. They gaped when they saw the towering Christmas tree glittering through the glass wall. "It's huge," one of them shouted, and the whole group burst into laughter. As everyone streamed inside, Harper was already waiting with a tray of appetizers, smoked cheese, butter-roasted walnuts, and steaming mugs of hot cider. The warm aroma filled the space, mingling with the woody scent of the granite fireplace. The gentle strum of an acoustic guitar from Eli, another cousin, floated through the air. The children dashed down the wide hallways, shouting with joy, while the adults laughed and chatted. The grand villa, once silent, now came alive, as though every wooden beam and stone wall pulsed with the sound of laughter. The dining room glowed with candlelight. The solid walnut table I had prepared so long ago was now draped in a crisp white cloth, set with gleaming porcelain plates and crystal glasses that shimmered under the flickering light. I let everyone choose their own seats. There was no main table, no side table. Shoulder to shoulder, Aunt Susan, Daniel, and the children all sat together around one long table. It was the moment I had always dreamed of, a family gathered as equals, with no one pushed aside. Harper and the kitchen team brought out the main dishes. Applewood, smoked roast turkey with golden, crispy skin that filled the room with irresistible aroma. Herb, grilled salmon. A winter salad with blood oranges and pecans. And warm cinnamon, apple pies fresh from the oven. Glasses of wine were raised, not with long, stiff speeches, but with cheerful cries of cheers, echoing beneath the high wooden ceiling. I looked around and saw everyone eating and sharing real stories, not the hollow small talk I had grown up hearing. In that warmth, Grandma Ruth, sitting right beside me, took my hand in hers. Her hands were frail, bony, yet warm like the fire burning in the granite hearth behind us. She leaned closer and whispered, "You've given Christmas back to us." My lip trembled, my vision blurred. That single sentence felt like a confirmation that all the years of effort, all the tears shed from being excluded, had finally led me to the place where I truly belonged. I only nodded, letting the warmth of her hand spread through me. The guitar kept playing, this time faster, more joyful. The children pulled each other up to dance, while the adults clapped along to the rhythm. Someone pulled out a phone to record, another snapped photos of the whole family gathered around the long table. Before long, the family group chat lit up, pictures of the feast, videos of the children singing by the fireplace, shots of the towering Christmas tree glowing with lights. Some even posted stories on social media with the caption, "This is the real Christmas." A flicker of unease passed through me, knowing these images would surely reach my parents and Chloe. But I didn't stop it. Because this time, I wasn't afraid anymore. As the dinner drew to a close, Daniel stood and raised his glass. "Next year, let's meet here again. Hannah has proven that Christmas doesn't belong anywhere else, it lives in our hearts." Everyone cheered together, the sound of clinking glasses ringing bright. I looked around the table at the glowing faces: Aunt Susan, Daniel, Grandma, Ruth, the children, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. Not because of a degree, not because of the money in my account, but because of something simple. I had dared to open the door and build my own table. That night, I stood quietly on the porch while the chatter continued inside. Before me, the Rockies towered in the pale moonlight, snow drifting down like falling crystals. I drew in a deep breath, the icy air burning in my lungs but clearing my mind. I knew that no matter how much my phone might ring tomorrow, I had taken a step I could never walk back. I had chosen to open the door instead of waiting. And I would carry this Christmas night forever in my heart, as a reminder I was no longer standing on the margins. I had found my own place right here, at this table. The next morning, weak sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains of the master bedroom. I had barely woken when the phone on the wooden nightstand began buzzing relentlessly. At first, it was just a few missed calls, but soon the screen filled with notifications, calls from my mother, my father, then Chloe. When I picked it up, there were more than 20 missed calls in a row, like a storm pounding at my door. Messages poured in one after another, harsh words, accusations, the same simmering anger I had grown so accustomed to over the years. I took a deep breath and walked downstairs. In the living room, the fireplace still glowed faintly from the night before, and blankets lay crumpled on the sofa where people had gathered. Ethan was still asleep, and Grandma Ruth had risen early, sitting by the window with a cup of hot tea. I sat across from her, holding the phone that wouldn't stop vibrating in my hand. On the screen was a message from Chloe. "Cheap move, Hannah. Really cheap." I pressed my lips together, switched the phone to speaker, and set it down on the table. My voice was calm. "I think it's time you heard everything too, Grandma." "How?" My mother's voice erupted first, sharp and shrill, cutting through the static of the speaker. "What the hell did you think you were doing, Hannah? The whole family is talking about your little stunt. Who gave you the right to host a separate party without consulting us?" My father cut in, his voice hoarse and heavy. "You've embarrassed us. What do you think people are saying, seeing those pictures all over social media? What do they think of this family?" I sat up straight, my hands resting calmly on my knees, no longer trembling the way I used to. But before I could open my mouth, Grandma Ruth set her teacup down. Her voice came slowly but firmly through the speaker. "You listen carefully. You are the ones who forgot Hannah all these years. This holiday, she didn't forget anyone. She opened her doors for all of us, even for me. And for the first time in many years, I saw this family truly sitting together again." The room fell silent. I stared at the phone screen, watching the little dots appear as if someone was typing, then vanish. Finally, my mother let out a sharp sigh, her voice softer but still stiff. "I never meant to hurt anyone. We just wanted to keep Christmas simple, just Chloe's immediate family." 1. Grandma Ruth's voice sharpened instantly. "And what about Hannah and Ethan? Are they not family? I wasn't invited either, so who am I in your eyes?" My father fumbled, trying to find an excuse. We, we didn't think anyone would care that much. I heard the sharp thud of Grandma Ruth's hand striking the table on the other end, her voice trembling with fury. Didn't think? You've been doing this for 30 years. Hannah was never praised, never given a seat at the main table, never remembered in the moments that mattered. And now, when she does something you never expected, all you feel is shame. Not shame for how you treated her, but shame over how outsiders see you. That is what's truly heartbreaking. This time, true silence filled the air. I sat there, listening to the ticking of the wall clock, feeling as if all the pressure in my chest was finally melting away. In the past, the moment my parents scolded me, I would rush to apologize, my heart racing, my hands cold with fear. But now, I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt light, as though at last someone had spoken aloud all the words I had swallowed for so many years. It was Chloe who broke the silence, her bitter voice cutting through the speaker. All of this was just for attention. Hannah, you've always loved playing the victim. Are you satisfied now? You've made the whole family a laughingstock. I let out a faint laugh, my voice calm and steady in a way that surprised even me. Chloe, you can think whatever you want. But do you know what happened last night? For the first time in years, the whole family sat together, no main table, no side table, everyone was seen, everyone was heard, no one was excluded. Have you ever witnessed that before? There was no answer. Only the faint sound of tapping, maybe my father clearing his throat to avoid the question. At last, he muttered a single clipped sentence. You've shamed this family. I lifted my head, gazing out the glass doors at the Rockies, dusted in falling snow. And I smiled, not a bitter smile, but one of peace. Slowly, deliberately, I spoke each word. I don't feel shame, I feel free. I pressed the button to end the call. In the living room, Grandma Ruth took my hand and squeezed it tightly. She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears yet shining with pride. You did it, Hannah. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Ethan came running down from upstairs, wrapping his arms around me, not understanding what had just happened but still grinning brightly. Mom, what's next? I lifted him into my arms, feeling a new strength coursing through my veins. I knew then, the chains of fear and shame had been shattered. This Christmas, I hadn't just built a table, I had rebuilt myself. After that tense confrontation call that morning, I set my phone aside, no longer willing to be swallowed by bitter words. But later that afternoon, when I opened the family group chat again, what met my eyes wasn't anger or blame, it was photos, messages, and emojis overflowing with joy. Daniel had changed the group's name from its old, lifeless title to The Aspen Family. Just 4 simple words, yet my throat tightened. That name felt like a declaration. The center was no longer my parents' house in Street Louis, no longer orbiting around Chloe. Now, the family was truly bound together by the place where I had opened the door. Photos streamed in. Aunt Susan posted a picture of the children running around the 14-foot Christmas tree, their eyes sparkling like the golden lights on its branches. Daniel shared a short clip of everyone raising their glasses in a cheerful cheers at the dining table, the laughter echoing through the phone as if pulling me back into that moment. Another cousin uploaded a story of Eli playing guitar by the fireplace, with Grandma Ruth swaying gently to the rhythm, her smile soft and serene as if it could melt the harshness of winter itself. The caption read, "Christmas has truly returned, and it lives in Aspen." Everyone began making plans for next year, even discussing who would be in charge of what dish. Aunt Susan wrote excitedly, "Next year, let me handle dessert. I want to make extra pumpkin pies." Daniel chimed in, "I'll bring my camera and turn it into an official family album." Another cousin added, "And I'll organize games for the kids." The messages scrolled so quickly I could hardly keep up, but every line, every heart emoji or flame symbol filled me with warmth. Amid all those words, Grandma Ruth sent a short message that felt like the essence of everything. "Thank you, Hannah. You gave us back what we thought we had lost. Next year, I'll sit in my old seat beside you." I read that message over and over, my hands trembling, my eyes stinging. For more than 30 years, I had lived with the feeling of being invisible. But with that single sentence, I felt seen, truly seen, not because of my grades, not because of the company I built, not because of a $6 million estate, but because of my presence and my heart. In the days that followed, the group chat never stopped buzzing. People shared recipes, posted more photos, and retold their favorite moments. One cousin admitted, "It's been years since I felt like I belonged. Thank you, Hannah." Another wrote, "Last night, my daughter said, 'Mom, that was the best Christmas of my life.'" I read those words with my heart racing, as if every lonely Christmas of the past was finally being healed. Meanwhile, my parents and Chloe remained silent. Not a single message, not a single explanation. Strangely, I no longer felt the pain I once did. I realized their silence only proved one thing: they had never truly been present. And for the first time in my life, I no longer waited for them to change. Because now, I had a new community, a true family formed by those who chose to show up, who chose to sit together at the table I had built. One evening, as Ethan sat on the sofa munching cookies and scrolling through the photos in the group chat, he burst out laughing, "Mom, look. I'm in almost every picture." I sat down beside him, wrapped him in my arms, and whispered, "That's right, sweetheart. Because this year, you were exactly where you belonged." His eyes lit up, sparkling just like the Christmas lights outside. In that moment, I understood. It wasn't just me, my son had also discovered the true meaning of family. That night, stepping out onto the porch as snow drifted down, covering the yard in white, I thought about this shift. For years, everything had revolved around Chloe and my parents. Every story, every glance, every word of praise funneled toward them. And me? I had been the shadow, pushed to the side table, forgotten, gift in hand beneath the tree. But now, everything had changed. The center no longer belonged to them. It had moved away from the cycle of favoritism and toward those who were truly present, those who chose love and respect. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, the icy air cutting against my skin while my heart burned warm inside. For the first time, I no longer had to fight to be called by name. I had been seen. And more importantly, I had learned how to see myself. The next day, my phone screen lit up again and again, flashing the names, Mom, Dad, and Chloe. Messages poured in, their tone growing sharper with each one. "You've shamed the family. Hannah, do you know what people are saying? You've gone too far." I looked at the words, then placed the phone face down on the table, my heart strangely calm. There was no stabbing ache this time, no desperate urge to defend or explain myself. I chose silence. Because I finally understood I no longer needed their approval. In the last days of the year, as heavy snow blanketed every path in Aspen, my estate glowed like a lighthouse in the White Valley. Ethan and I spent our time adding small pine wreaths, setting scented candles around the house. He chattered happily about the best Christmas of my life, about playing with his cousins, sitting at the long table, and being called by name in every photo. As I watched him, I realized everything I had done wasn't only for myself, it was for Ethan too. So that he would grow up without carrying the same wound I once did. In the quiet evenings, as the estate slowly settled back into calm, I sat before the fireplace, replaying everything in my mind. From my mother's cold 8-word message, "This Christmas is only for Chloe's kids. Don't come," to the glowing feast where everyone gathered around the walnut table, it all felt like a slow-motion film. I understood then, if I had kept begging, kept trying to squeeze into a seat in their house, I would have lived forever in that invisible shadow. But now, I had dared to build a table of my own and, unexpectedly, that very act had given a place to others who had been cast aside. On the last night of the year, I stepped onto the balcony upstairs. Before me, the Aspen Valley lay buried in snow, the moonlight washing everything in silver. I wrapped my coat tighter, held a steaming mug of cocoa close, closed my eyes, and whispered, "I don't need a seat at their table. I've built a table of my own." The words slipped into the cold air, dissolving into the night, but inside my chest, they echoed like a vow. Ethan came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He looked up, his eyes shining in the moonlight, and said softly, "This is home, Mom." My throat tightened as I bent to kiss his hair. Yes, Ethan. This is our home. Home, not just four walls, but the place where you feel loved, where you are seen, where your name is called. The phone in my pocket buzzed once more. I pulled it out and saw Mom flashing on the screen. I exhaled slowly, then pressed decline. This time there was no pain, no turmoil. I knew with certainty. Cutting ties was not revenge, it was release. I had spent too many years waiting for recognition that would never come. Now, I chose to end that cycle, to open a new chapter, one where my worth was no longer defined by anyone else. When I stepped back inside, the walnut table still bore traces of the feast. A few wine glasses left behind, crumbs scattered across the tablecloth, chairs slightly askew. I didn't rush to clean up. Instead, I stood there for a long while, imprinting the image into memory, the very scene I had dreamed of for years. A family gathered, no main table, no side table, everyone seated together as one. That moment proved I was no longer the 15-year-old girl clutching a cheap gray scarf while her sister showed off a shiny new bicycle. I had grown. I had built a space where people truly belonged. Inside me, one door closed and another opened. I was no longer the excluded child. I had become the one who opened the door. Not just for myself, but for Ethan, for Aunt Susan, for Daniel, for Grandma Ruth, and for everyone who had ever been left out. I knew the journey of healing was far from over, but I had taken the first step, the most important step of all. That night, before going to bed, I stood at the doorway watching Ethan sleep peacefully in his little room. He clutched his teddy bear tightly, his face calm under the soft glow of the night lamp. I whispered gently, "You will grow up, never having to doubt your worth. Because I have already carried that burden for you." And then I smiled, a quiet relief washing over me. Closing the year with the certainty that from this moment on, we would never again have to beg for a seat at anyone else's table. Because our table was already set, and its doors would always remain open for those who truly knew how to cherish it. If you have ever been hurt, ever felt that you weren't important enough to be seen, remember this. Your worth does not depend on whether someone else invites you to sit at their table. You can build a table of your own, a place where you are respected, where your name is spoken, and where you are loved for who you truly are. The wounds may bring pain, but they can also become the very strength that allows you to rewrite your story. You are worthy of belonging, and you have the power to create that place for yourself.